My name is Amber Williams, and at 28 years old, I never expected to be shattered by 12 simple words. The evening had started with such promise, my parents' 35th anniversary dinner in their elegant suburban Boston home. I smoothed my dress, brought a thoughtful gift, and arrived with hope in my heart. But beneath the crystal chandelier and between courses of my mother's famous pot roast, those words fell like bombs: "You are a burden. We want to live without you." The strangers across the table weren't my parents anymore, they were my executioners. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if family drama stories like mine speak to you. Trust me, this journey is about to take some wild turns. Growing up as Amber Williams meant having everything I needed materially while starving emotionally. Our colonial-style house in the suburbs of Boston stood as a monument to my parents' success. Karen and Robert Williams, respected figures in the community, she an accomplished interior designer and he a senior investment banker. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. Matching outfits for holiday photos, summer vacations to Martha's Vineyard, and a carefully maintained image that never revealed what happened behind closed doors. My childhood bedroom was a testament to that contradiction: expensive furniture selected by my mother, but devoid of the warmth that makes a space feel like home. My parents provided piano lessons but sighed dramatically when I practiced. They paid for art classes but questioned why I couldn't be practical like my older brother James. James, for years my senior, became the standard against which I was perpetually measured and found wanting. While I gravitated toward the arts, he followed our father's footsteps into finance, securing a position at a prestigious firm by 24. My parents beamed at his achievements, his law degree from Harvard prominently displayed in their living room while my photography awards gathered dust in a drawer. "When will you get a real job?" became my mother's refrain through college as I pursued photography. Each family dinner featured a variation of the same conversation. "Amber, Melissa's daughter just got accepted to medical school," my mother would say, passing the potatoes. "And she's a year younger than you." My father would invariably add, "Photography is a hobby, not a career. James was already making six figures at your age." I'd push food around my plate, swallowing both dinner and degradation, telling myself they just wanted security for me. But their version of security felt like a cage. After graduating with my BFA in photography, I faced the brutal reality of establishing myself in a competitive field. Freelance work came sporadically. Product photography for local businesses, assistant work at weddings, occasional portraits. I took a barista job at the daily grind to pay bills, working on my portfolio during every spare moment. Then came the breaking point 2 years ago. My apartment building was sold to developers planning luxury condos, effectively doubling the rent. With my lease ending and insufficient savings, I faced an impossible choice. After 3 days of sleepless panic, I called my parents. It would just be temporary, I assured them over the phone, each word tasting bitter. 3 months max, until I find something affordable. My father's sigh echoed through the line. "I suppose we have the space. Your mother won't be thrilled about having her sewing room disrupted." What was meant to be 3 months stretched into 2 years. Not for lack of trying, I saved every possible penny, worked extra shifts, and continued building my portfolio. But Boston's rental market remained merciless, and my income unpredictable. Living under my parents' roof as an adult was an exercise in daily humiliation. Notes about my coffee consumption. Comments about sleeping until 8 a.m. on my day off. Questions about every package delivered. The constant reminder that this was their house, their charity. The one bright spot arrived 3 months ago when the Harrington Gallery, a respected space in Cambridge, accepted my series on urban isolation for an upcoming exhibition. The timing seemed perfect. The exhibition included a modest stipend, and combined with my savings, I finally had enough for first and last month's rent plus security deposit on a small studio apartment. I planned to announce my impending independence at my parents' anniversary dinner, imagining their pride at my professional breakthrough and graceful exit from their home. How tragically I misread the situation. The evening of their 35th anniversary, I arrived early to help set up. My mother had prepared her signature dishes, herb-crusted rack of lamb, roasted rosemary potatoes, and haricots verts with almond slivers. The dining room sparkled under candlelight, fine china and crystal glasses arranged with mathematical precision. I wore a navy blue dress I'd saved for months to purchase, hoping to look successful and put together. The custom photo album I'd created, filled with restored and artfully arranged family photos spanning their 35 years, was wrapped in silver paper with a handwritten card. James arrived with his girlfriend Sophia, a pediatric surgeon with perfect hair and an Ivy League pedigree that delighted my parents. Their easy laughter with her contrasted sharply with the stilted conversation directed my way. "That's an interesting dress, Amber," my mother remarked, emphasizing interesting in that way that clearly meant questionable. "Is that what photographers wear to work these days?" "It's beautiful, Mom. I bought it specially for tonight," I replied, forcing a smile. Well, it's certainly unique." Throughout the appetizer course, my father interrogated James about his recent promotion while my mother cooed over Sophia's hospital stories. I sat quietly, occasionally answering direct questions with increasingly diminished enthusiasm. When I presented my gift, my mother unwrapped it with the cautious approach one might use for a suspicious package. "Oh. Photos." She flipped through a few pages with a tight smile. "Very creative." My father barely glanced at it. "Must have been easy for you to throw together." The album that had taken weeks of painstaking restoration work and design was set aside, immediately forgotten as James presented them with first-class tickets for a weekend in New York. Throughout dinner, I noticed my parents exchanging glances. Meaningful looks that carried an undercurrent of anticipation. My mother seemed unusually energetic, my father uncharacteristically talkative. Something was brewing beneath the anniversary celebration, but I couldn't identify what. As my mother served her famous crème brûlée, I prepared my announcement. I'd rehearsed it for days, grateful, mature, excited about my exhibition and new apartment. A perfect adult daughter gracefully transitioning to independence. I never got the chance to deliver it. "Before we finish dessert, your mother and I have an announcement," my father said, setting down his dessert spoon with a definitive clink against fine china. My mother straightened in her chair, a smile playing at her lips that I hadn't seen in years, one of genuine excitement rather than social performance. "We've been planning this for quite some time," she added, reaching for my father's hand. "And we're finally ready to share our news." I glanced at James, who studied his dessert with unusual intensity. Sophia looked politely interested but equally clueless about what was coming. "Your mother and I have decided to take early retirement," my father continued, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality as if he'd rehearsed this speech. "We're selling the house and buying a condo in Florida as our home base. And we're going to travel the world," my mother interjected, unable to contain her enthusiasm. "Starting with 6 months in Europe, then Asia, possibly Australia." I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. This explained their secretive behavior and exchanged glances. After decades of working tirelessly, they deserved this adventure. "That's wonderful," I said warmly. "I'm so happy for you both. When are you thinking of?" "We're putting the house on the market next week," my father interrupted. "We expect it to sell quickly in this neighborhood." The timeline surprised me, but it aligned perfectly with my own plans. "That actually works out great. I was going to tell you tonight that I've found an apartment and..." "Which brings us to the difficult part of this conversation," my father continued as if I hadn't spoken. His tone shifted, hardening around the edges. He cleared his throat and looked directly at me with cold eyes I barely recognized. "Amber, you are a burden. We want to live without you." The words hung in the air like suspended daggers. My breath caught, certain I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" I whispered. My mother's perfectly manicured hand patted my father's, her diamond anniversary band catching the light. "What your father means is that we've supported you long enough. It's time to cut the cord. We've postponed our dreams for years," my father continued, his voice clinical, like he was discussing an underperforming investment. First to raise you and your brother, then allowing you to move back in at 26. Temporarily, I interjected weakly. Because of the housing crisis. I've been saving too. 2 years is not temporary, my mother cut in sharply. It's a pattern of dependence. Your brother was financially independent at 22. James studied his water glass with intense focus, refusing to meet my eyes. Your failed career experiment has cost us enough time and money, my father continued. We've been patient, but we're done subsidizing your lifestyle. Subsidizing I sputtered, thinking of the rent I paid them, the groceries I bought, the housework I did. I contribute to this household. And my career isn't failing. I just got accepted to exhibit at Harrington Gallery. I was going to tell you tonight that I found an apartment and we're giving you 30 days to move out, my father stated flatly, as if I hadn't spoken at all. That's more than generous. My mother nodded in agreement. The real estate agent is coming Tuesday to take pictures. We'd appreciate if you could keep your room tidy. The casual cruelty stunned me into silence. My mind raced through every sacrifice I'd made for them, declining a photography apprenticeship in New York because my mother had surgery scheduled, spending my savings to repair their car when it broke down last winter, countless hours helping my father organize his home office. I don't understand, I finally managed, my voice small. Why are you saying these things? Why are you doing this now, like this? This is exactly the immaturity we're talking about, my mother sighed dramatically. Always so sensitive, making everything about your feelings. You've always been difficult, Amber, my father added, taking a casual sip of his wine. From the day you were born, crying constantly, demanding attention. Unlike James, my mother added with a pointed look at my brother, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. My hands trembled as I set down my dessert spoon. The creme brulee I'd been enjoying moments earlier now looked like a gelatinous pool of revulsion. So that's it? I whispered. 35 years of parenting, and I'm just a burden you can't wait to be rid of? Don't be dramatic, my mother rolled her eyes. We gave you everything. Private school, college tuition, a roof over your head. What more could you possibly want? The word love lodged in my throat, unspoken. I stood abruptly, my knee catching the edge of the table. My wine glass toppled, sending a crimson stain spreading across the pristine white tablecloth, a visual representation of the wound opened inside me. Amber, my mother gasped, more concerned about her imported linen than my emotional state. Tears blurred my vision as I backed away from the table. Excuse me, I managed to choke out before turning and fleeing the dining room. Behind me, I heard my mother's irritated sigh. She always did have a flair for drama. Should someone go after her? Sophia's concerned voice. No need, my father replied. She'll calm down eventually. She always does. More wine, anyone? As I grabbed my coat and purse from the entryway, I caught a glimpse of my parents through the dining room doorway. They had already resumed eating their dessert, the conversation flowing naturally to other topics, as if they hadn't just shattered their daughter's world. The rain started as I fumbled with my keys, matching the hot tears streaming down my face. I barely remembered the drive through Boston's winding streets, muscle memory guiding me while my mind replayed those devastating words on loop, you are a burden. We want to live without you. I found myself outside Tara's apartment building in Somerville, with no conscious decision to go there. Tara Matthews had been my best friend since freshman year of college. The one constant in my life who had never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. When she opened her door and saw me, mascara streaking down my face, body shaking with sobs, she pulled me inside without a word. They don't want me, I managed between gasping breaths once safely on her couch. My own parents. They called me a burden. What? Tara's expression shifted from concern to outrage as I recounted the evening's events. Who says that to their child? Any child, let alone one as amazing as you. Apparently, parents who've been waiting years to discard me. Fresh tears flowed as I described the coldness in their eyes, the casual cruelty of their words. "This isn't about you, Amber," Tara said firmly, squeezing my hand. "This is about them being terrible parents. It always has been." But her words, though well-intentioned, couldn't penetrate the fortress of worthlessness closing around me. If the two people biologically programmed to love me couldn't, what did that say about me? "Remember sophomore year when you had pneumonia?" Tara continued. "Your mom said you were being dramatic and refused to come get you. Normal parents don't do that. And when they forgot your college graduation." "They didn't forget," I corrected automatically. "Dad had that important client meeting and Mom didn't want to drive alone." "See? You're still making excuses for them." Tara shook her head. "You've normalized their emotional abuse your entire life." The word abuse caught me off guard. I'd never applied it to my situation. Neglect, perhaps. Disappointment, certainly. But abuse seemed too strong, too dramatic. Yet as I lay awake that night on Tara's pull-out sofa, memories surfaced like bubbles in dark water. My 10th birthday, when my mother complained about the inconvenience of hosting a party. My high school photography awards ceremony, which neither parent attended because it wasn't like it was something important, like valedictorian. The time I was hospitalized with appendicitis and my father called to ask if I could still file his tax extension before the deadline. Sleep refused to come as the dinner scene replayed relentlessly in my mind. Each iteration twisted the knife deeper, highlighting new moments of cruelty I'd missed in the shock of the initial blow. My mother's satisfied smile as my father delivered the news. The practiced nature of their speech. The way they'd continued eating dessert as I fled in tears. Dawn broke through Tara's blinds, finding me hollow-eyed and exhausted. I called in sick to the coffee shop, unable to face cheerful customers asking for oat milk lattes while my world imploded. By afternoon, the shock had receded enough for basic functioning to return. I needed clothes, my camera equipment, my portfolio. I needed to face my parents. "I'll come with you," Tara offered. "No," I insisted. "I need to do this myself." The house was quiet when I returned, the dining room immaculate, no evidence of last night's disaster. The wine stain on the tablecloth had vanished, replaced by crisp white linen as if nothing had happened. My mother glanced up from her laptop at the kitchen island. "There you are. I was beginning to wonder if you'd run away permanently." Her tone was conversational, almost amused. I stared at her, disbelieving. "After what you and Dad said last night, you're surprised I didn't come home?" She sighed, closing her laptop. "You always were prone to overreaction. We simply stated facts, Amber. You're 28 years old and living with your parents. It's not healthy for any of us." "I was going to tell you last night that I found an apartment," I said, my voice flat. "I've been saving for months. I'm having my first major gallery exhibition next month." Something flickered across her face, surprise, perhaps even disappointment that I'd taken away her power to evict me. But it vanished quickly. "Well, that's convenient timing then, isn't it?" She sipped her coffee. "The real estate agent is coming tomorrow at 10. Make sure your room is presentable." No apology. No acknowledgement of the cruelty. No recognition of my achievement. Just practical logistics, as if we were discussing a minor schedule adjustment rather than the complete decimation of our relationship. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "Golf," she replied, reopening her laptop. "Oh, he left some apartment listings on the counter for you. In case your situation falls through." I picked up the papers, printouts of the cheapest, most distant studio apartments in the greater Boston area, all at the absolute bottom of my budget range. Some were in neighborhoods where I wouldn't feel safe walking alone at night. This calculated insult was so unnecessary, so deliberately hurtful, that I felt physically ill. Without another word, I went upstairs to my childhood bedroom. The room felt suddenly alien, as if it had never truly been mine. Just borrowed space in someone else's house. I pulled out my suitcase and began mechanically packing essentials. Over the next week, I moved through life like a ghost. I worked extra shifts at the coffee shop, avoided the house except to sleep, and spoke to my parents only when absolutely necessary. My father acted as if nothing unusual had happened, making bland comments about the weather or asking if I'd seen his reading glasses. My appetite vanished. Sleep came in fitful bursts, punctuated by nightmares. I lost 5 pounds in 7 days. Customers at the coffee shop commented that I looked tired. My manager asked if everything was okay after I dropped and broke 3 mugs in one shift. Tara's concern grew daily. "You need to eat something besides toast," she insisted, bringing me homemade soup during my break. "And maybe talk to someone professional about this." "I'm fine," I insisted mechanically. "Just tired." But I wasn't fine. The facade cracked completely one evening when I returned home to find my parents in the living room with interior design magazines, discussing how they would convert my bedroom into a home gym after I left. The natural light would be perfect for morning workouts, my mother mused, completely aware that I stood frozen in the doorway. "And we can finally get rid of that outdated purple wall color." Purple had been my favorite color since childhood. I'd painted the accent wall myself 5 years ago, when I still believed I could make them proud someday. I fled to my room, collapsed onto my bed, and experienced my first full-blown panic attack. My chest constricted painfully, breath coming in shallow gasps. The room spun as dizziness overtook me. I was dying, surely, my heart hammering so violently it would burst. When the attack finally subsided, leaving me drained and trembling, a terrible clarity settled over me. I couldn't continue like this. Something had to change, or I would break beyond repair. "The usual?" Marcus Chen asked as I mechanically prepared to make his daily Americano. I blinked, forcing myself back to the present moment. Marcus had been my favorite photography professor in college, and he still stopped by the daily grind every morning like clockwork. "Sorry, miles away," I admitted, reaching for a cup. "You look like you haven't slept in days," he observed, brow furrowing with concern. I attempted a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Rough week. Anything to do with your art? I haven't seen new work from you on Instagram lately." The genuine interest in his voice cracked something inside me. Before I could stop myself, the whole ugly story came tumbling out in hushed tones between customer orders, my parents' announcement, their cruel words, my impending homelessness despite having found an apartment I could barely afford. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "That's extraordinarily cruel," he said finally. "And completely unacceptable." I shrugged, the gesture automatic after years of minimizing my parents' behavior. "It is what it is." "No, Amber, it isn't." His voice took on the firm tone I remembered from critiques. "What it is emotional abuse. And you deserve better." I busied myself wiping down the already clean counter, uncomfortable with his directness. "Have you heard about the Westbridge Artist Residency program?" he asked suddenly. Vaguely. "It's that converted factory space in Cambridge, right?" He nodded. "They're accepting applications for their fall cohort. 6-month program, studio space, small stipend, and, most relevantly, housing included." I shook my head immediately. Those programs are impossibly competitive. They get hundreds of applications for a handful of spots. Your urban isolation series would be perfect for their social commentary focus this year, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. And you've already been accepted by Harrington Gallery, which carries significant weight. Marcus, I appreciate it, but the deadline is next Friday. He pulled out a business card and wrote an email address on the back. This is Diane Winters, the program director. Tell her I suggested you apply. At least consider it, Amber. What's the worst that could happen? I pocketed the card to be polite, but had no intention of applying. What was the point of setting myself up for another rejection? That evening, as I picked at a microwave dinner in my room to avoid another silent meal with my parents, my phone lit up with a text from James. "Can we talk? Coffee tomorrow morning before work?" My brother and I had barely spoken since the disastrous anniversary dinner. His silence during our parents' announcement had felt like a betrayal, though a predictable one. James had always been the golden child, careful never to rock the family boat. We met at a small cafe halfway between his financial district office and my coffee shop. He was already waiting when I arrived, 2 coffees on the table, looking uncharacteristically disheveled in his expensive suit. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting. "Thanks. You don't look so great yourself." He ran a hand through his hair. "I haven't been sleeping well since, since our parents revealed they see me as a burden they can't wait to discard," I supplied flatly. James winced. "I should have said something that night." "I'm sorry, Amber." I froze. "Story of our relationship," I replied, then immediately regretted the harshness when pain flashed across his face. "I deserve that," he acknowledged. "But I want you to know something. What they did, how they did it, it wasn't about you." I scoffed. "It seemed pretty specifically about me." "They've been planning this for months," James revealed, leaning forward. "Dad told me back in January they were thinking about retiring early. When I asked about you, he said they had a strategy to ensure you'd be independent by summer." "A strategy," I repeated numbly. "They deliberately waited until they knew you'd have nowhere else to go. They timed it for maximum impact, Amber." Dad actually used the phrase "necessary shock to the system." The calculated nature of their cruelty stunned me. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst or momentary insensitivity. They had plotted for months to hurt me as deeply as possible. Why would they do that? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. James stared into his coffee. "I've been asking myself the same question about a lot of things lately. The way they treated you. The way they raised us both." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "Did you know I've been in therapy for 2 years?" This revelation shocked me. James had always seemed so put together, so perfect. The golden child status came with its own prison, he continued quietly. Crushing expectations, conditional love based on achievement. Different cage, same damaged birds. "But they're so proud of you," I protested. "They're proud of what I represent, success, status, bragging rights. Not me." He took a deep breath. "Sophia and I broke up last week. She said I was emotionally unavailable, conflict avoidant, and too eager to please authority figures. She's right." We sat in silence, 2 damaged adults coming to terms with the shared source of our wounds. "I should have protected you more," James finally said. "I was so afraid of losing their approval that I let them hurt you." Over and over. For the first time in years, I saw my brother, really saw him, not as my parents' favored child, but as a fellow survivor doing his best with the tools he had. "I'm sorry too," I offered. "For resenting you instead of them." We parted with an awkward hug and a promise to get dinner soon, just the 2 of us. That night, alone in my room, I pulled out Marcus's card and stared at Diane Winter's email address. Something had shifted inside me during the conversation with James. Anger had replaced despair. Not the destructive, helpless rage I'd felt immediately after the dinner, but a focused, clarifying anger that energized rather than depleted. I opened my laptop and typed Westbridge Artist Residency Program into the search bar. The application requirements appeared on screen: artist statement, portfolio submission, project proposal. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of something like hope. I opened my portfolio folder and began reviewing my work with fresh eyes. The urban isolation series that had caught Harrington Gallery's attention suddenly seemed more powerful than I'd given it credit for. The images of solitary figures in crowded spaces, disconnected despite proximity, spoke to universal human experiences. I worked through the night, fueled by a combination of caffeine, adrenaline, and newfound purpose. By dawn, I had drafted an artist statement more honest and raw than anything I'd previously dared to write, outlining a project exploring family dynamics, emotional abandonment, and resilience. As the first light of morning filtered through my window, I began methodically taking down the childhood photos that had hung on my walls for years. School portraits showing my gradually dimming smile. Family vacations where I stood slightly apart. Award ceremonies where I posed alone. In their place, I taped up my own photographs, powerful images I'd created but had been too insecure to display. My art, my vision, my truth. When my mother knocked on my door later that morning, I opened it with a calmness that surprised us both. "The real estate agent will be here in an hour," she said, eyes widening slightly at the transformed walls. "What have you done to your room?" "Redecorated," I replied simply. "Don't worry, I won't leave any holes in the walls when I take everything down." "Well, it's different," she managed, clearly unsettled by my calm demeanor. "Just make sure everything is tidy for the photos." "Mom," I said as she turned to leave. "I want you to know that I understand now." She paused, wariness crossing her features. "Understand what?" "That what you and Dad did wasn't about me at all. It was about you. It always has been." Color rose in her cheeks. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. And I want you to know that I forgive you." "Forgive me?" Indignation replaced discomfort. "For what, exactly?" "For being unable to love me as I am. That's your limitation, not mine." For a fleeting moment, something vulnerable flickered behind her eyes, pain, perhaps, or recognition. But her walls rose quickly, expression hardening into the familiar mask of disapproval. "I don't have time for your dramatics today, Amber. Just make sure your room is presentable by 10. As she walked away, I felt no satisfaction in her discomfort, no triumph in momentarily cracking her facade. Only a quiet certainty that I was finally seeing our relationship clearly for the first time, and that clarity was the first step toward freedom. The Westbridge Artist Residency application became my secret project, my lifeline in the increasingly tense atmosphere at home. I worked on it during breaks at the coffee shop, late at night in my room, and during precious hours at Tara's apartment where I could spread out my materials without fear of interruption or judgment. The application required a detailed project proposal, artist statement, portfolio, and professional references. Each component demanded vulnerability and confidence I wasn't sure I possessed. Yet with each draft, each revision, I found my voice growing stronger. My project proposal evolved into Family Fragments, a photographic exploration of family dynamics, emotional distance, and the construction of self-identity in the aftermath of rejection. The irony wasn't lost on me that my parents' cruelty had inadvertently gifted me with powerful creative material. Marcus reviewed my application materials, offering constructive criticism that pushed me to dig deeper. "Don't hold back, Amber," he advised. "The most universal art comes from deeply personal truth." Meanwhile, my apartment search continued with renewed urgency. Boston's rental market remained brutal, but I expanded my search to neighboring communities with better transit connections. Each property viewing, each application fee, each credit check depleted my savings, but I refused to give up. A tiny studio in Jamaica Plain finally came through, a third-floor walk-up above a bodega, with uneven floors and questionable plumbing, but within my budget and available immediately. I signed the lease with shaking hands, putting down every penny of my savings for first and last month's rent plus security deposit. "You did it," Tara said, hugging me when I showed her the keys. "Your own place." "Barely," I admitted. "I have exactly $47 left in my account until next payday." "But it's yours," she emphasized. "Your space, your rules, your freedom." With the apartment secured, I began the painful process of sorting through my belongings. 28 years of life had accumulated in my childhood bedroom: clothes, books, photography equipment, and the archaeological layers of my past. Each item required a decision: keep, donate, or discard. My limited space and finances meant being ruthless. Childhood stuffed animals went to donation, except Mr. Whiskers, the one-eared rabbit who had absorbed my tears through countless nights. Art supplies were evaluated for current relevance. Clothes were tried on without mercy. If it didn't fit perfectly or serve a specific purpose, it went into the donation bag. The most difficult decisions involved sentimental items. Birthday cards from grandparents long past. School projects my parents had never displayed. Family photos that now felt like artifacts from a fictional life. I created a small undecided box for items too emotionally charged to categorize immediately. These would come with me to the new apartment where I could evaluate them in peace, away from the pressure of my parents' impatience. My mother watched this process with poorly disguised eagerness, occasionally offering helpful suggestions about what I should discard. My father mostly avoided my room, but I occasionally caught him glancing in with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, perhaps regret, though more likely anticipation of reclaiming the space. The final piece of my exit strategy involved cataloging my photography portfolio. Years of work needed proper organization, both for the residency application and my upcoming exhibition. I spread prints across my bedroom floor, grouping images thematically, evaluating technical strength and emotional impact. I was shocked to discover how much stronger my work had become over the past 2 years. Living with my parents had been emotionally devastating, but the pain had deepened my artistic perspective. My recent images possessed a complexity and nuance absent in earlier work. When Bernard Phillips, the Harrington Gallery owner, requested a meeting to discuss my upcoming exhibition, I arrived with a newly organized portfolio and clear vision. "These are remarkable," he said, studying my urban isolation series. "There's something raw here, something truthful." "Thank you," I replied, the words no longer feeling like an apology for existing. "Have you considered expanding the series?" he asked. "Perhaps incorporating more personal elements?" The strength of these images is their emotional authenticity. A month earlier, I would have retreated from such a suggestion, terrified of revealing too much. Now, I described my developing concept for Family Fragments, watching his eyes light up with interest. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," he nodded enthusiastically. "Personal yet universal. If you can produce even 3 or 4 pieces in that direction before the exhibition, I'd like to feature them prominently." I left the gallery with something that felt dangerously like professional validation, a sensation so unfamiliar it took several blocks of walking before I could identify it. The evening I planned to move out, I waited until my parents left for their weekly dinner with friends. I had arranged for Tara and 2 other friends to help load my belongings into Tara's brother's pickup truck. We worked efficiently, the entire process taking less than 2 hours. My childhood bedroom looked strangely larger when emptied of my presents, clean walls where art had hung, bare shelves that had held books, empty closet with a few abandoned hangers. I ran my hand along the purple accent wall one last time, remembering the weekend I'd painted it, how briefly it had felt like mine. On my stripped bed, I left an envelope containing my house key and a simple note. I was already planning to leave. You just made it easier. Amber. No dramatic declarations, no angry accusations, no desperate pleas for explanation or reconciliation. Just a simple statement of fact. As Tara's brother drove us toward Jamaica Plain, I didn't look back at the house. Instead, I watched the road ahead, feeling the physical distance growing with each mile, a tangible representation of the emotional boundary I was finally establishing. My new apartment was every bit as small as I remembered, approximately 400 square feet of scuffed hardwood floors, dated appliances, and potential. We unloaded boxes and assembled my second-hand bed frame, arranging furniture to maximize the limited space. That first night alone was both terrifying and exhilarating. Street noise filtered through thin windows. The refrigerator hummed with unexpected volume. The building creaked and settled around me in unfamiliar patterns. Yet despite the strangeness, I slept more soundly than I had in weeks. No one would judge when I woke up. No one would comment on my coffee consumption. No one would monitor my comings and goings. The freedom was intoxicating. I established new routines in those first days. Morning coffee by the window, watching neighborhood life unfold below. Evening walks exploring my new surroundings. A small desk position to catch northern light became my workspace for editing photos and finalizing my residency application. For days after moving out, I took my camera and returned to my parents' neighborhood. Not to visit, I wasn't ready for that, but to photograph the house from the perspective of a stranger. I captured the manicured exterior, the symmetrical windows, the perfect facade hiding the dysfunction within. Looking through my viewfinder at the place I'd called home for so many years, I felt oddly detached. As if photographing an architectural subject rather than the site of my deepest wounds. The images would become the first in my family Fragments series, the perfect house that was never really home. The email from Westbridge Artist Residency arrived on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after I'd submitted my application. I stared at the notification on my phone, unable to open it immediately. Instead, I completed my morning shift at the coffee shop, focusing on the comforting routine of steaming milk and pulling espresso shots. During my lunch break, I finally gathered the courage to read it, sitting on a park bench with trembling fingers. Dear Ms. Williams, we are pleased to inform you that your application to the Westbridge Artist Residency program has been accepted. I read the message 3 times to ensure I wasn't hallucinating. I had been selected from hundreds of applicants. 6 months of studio space, a modest stipend, housing, and mentorship with established artists. The program would begin in 8 weeks, perfectly timed with the conclusion of my Harrington Gallery exhibition. The first person I called was Marcus, who answered with knowing satisfaction in his voice. I told you your work was ready, he said, pride evident in his tone. Diane called me last week to discuss your application. She was particularly impressed with your project proposal. I can't believe this is happening, I admitted. A month ago, I was having panic attacks in my childhood bedroom, and now you're exactly where you're supposed to be, he finished. This is just the beginning, Amber. My exhibition at Harrington Gallery opened the following weekend. I'd worked feverishly to complete the first 3 images in my Family Fragments series, as Bernard had requested. These new pieces hung alongside my urban isolation photographs, creating a powerful narrative progression. The gallery was crowded with art enthusiasts, local photographers, and critics from smaller publications. I circulated nervously, unaccustomed to being the center of attention, answering questions about my process and inspiration with gradually increasing confidence. Your work has remarkable emotional intelligence, commented an older woman studying my centerpiece image, a photograph of a family dinner table with one empty chair, shot from above. The absence speaks volumes. Midway through the evening, a familiar voice cut through the ambient conversation. Well, this is certainly interesting. I turned to find my parents standing before my newest photographs, champagne flutes in hand, expressions carefully neutral. They were impeccably dressed, as always, my mother in an expensive black dress, my father in a tailored suit. They looked completely out of place among the artistic crowd. Mom. Dad. I managed, surprise stealing my eloquence. I didn't expect you to come. We received the invitation you sent, my mother replied coolly. It seemed appropriate to make an appearance. I hadn't sent them an invitation. James must have forwarded the electronic announcement I'd sent him. The turnout seems adequate, my father observed, glancing around the gallery. Have you sold anything? Before I could answer, Bernard appeared at my side. 3 pieces already, he informed them with professional enthusiasm. Including the centerpiece from Amber's new series, which the Contemporary Art Museum's curator purchased for their permanent collection. My parents' expressions shifted subtly, surprise, followed by something that might have been respect, quickly masked by practiced nonchalance. How nice, my mother managed. Amber, would you show us around? Explain what all this is about. The request contained no genuine interest, only the social performance they excelled at, appearing supportive in public while undermining in private. A month ago, I would have eagerly complied, desperate for their approval. Now, I simply smiled. I'd be happy to, but there are several collectors I need to speak with first. Bernard can show you the exhibition catalog, which explains my artistic perspective. I nodded to the gallery owner, who understood immediately. "Right this way," he guided them toward the reception desk, allowing me to escape to the other side of the gallery. I watched from a distance as they flipped through the catalog, faces tightening as they read my artist statement describing how emotional abandonment influenced my perspective. They didn't stay long after that, departing with tight smiles and brief, formal goodbyes. Their appearance cast a momentary shadow over the evening, but it dissipated quickly as genuine art enthusiasts engaged with my work. By closing time, 5 pieces had sold, and Bernard was discussing a possible solo exhibition the following year. "Tonight exceeded all expectations," he told me as we closed up. "Your new direction is powerful, Amber. Keep going." I moved into the Westbridge residency exactly 8 weeks later, leaving my tiny Jamaica Plain apartment without regret. The residency housing, a converted warehouse with individual studio apartments for artists, offered more space and better light than anything I could afford on my own. My studio space on the 3rd floor became my sanctuary: high ceilings, north-facing windows, and the freedom to create without judgment. For the first time, I worked without an internal critic that sounded suspiciously like my parents. The resulting images grew increasingly confident and distinctive. Senior artists in the program offered valuable feedback without the crushing criticism I'd grown accustomed to. We had weekly critique sessions, collaborative projects, and professional development workshops. I absorbed everything, soaking up knowledge like a plant finally receiving water after years of drought. 6 weeks into the residency, I received an unexpected email from my father's account, signed by both parents. The message was brief and practical. They had sold the house, were moving to Florida in 3 weeks, and had some of my childhood items they'd discovered during packing. Did I want them, or should they donate everything? No acknowledgement of our estrangement. No apology for their cruelty. No recognition of my recent professional success, which they surely knew about through James. Just practical logistics, as if we were distant acquaintances rather than family. I wrote a similarly practical response: they could leave any items with James, who had offered to store things for me. I provided no additional personal information, no opening for further conversation. Their reply came within minutes: "That's fine. We've been meaning to see James before we leave anyway." The casual mention of their plans to see my brother, while making no attempt to see me, reopened a wound I thought had begun to heal. I found myself in the residency's communal kitchen, staring blankly at the wall, email still open on my phone. "Heavy thoughts?" asked Helena Rivera, a sculptor in her 50s who had become something of a mentor. I showed her the email exchange without explanation. She read it quickly, eyes narrowing. "Ah, family. The gift that keeps on giving." Her tone was wry but sympathetic. "Want to talk about it?" Over tea, I shared more of my history than I had with anyone except Tara: the emotional neglect, the devastating dinner, the recent successes that should have felt purely triumphant but remained tainted by their rejection. "My sister didn't speak to our parents for the last 12 years of their lives," Helena said when I'd finished. "Best decision she ever made. Some relationships can't be fixed, only managed from a safe distance." "I keep waiting to stop caring," I admitted. "To be completely indifferent to them." "That might never happen," she replied gently. "And that's okay. The goal isn't perfect detachment. It's building a life so full and meaningful that their absence becomes a footnote rather than the headline." 2 days later, James called with news: our parents had asked him to dinner, ostensibly as a farewell before their move. The evening had quickly devolved into complaints about me, my ingratitude, my artistic temperament, my failure to properly appreciate all they had done. "I finally told them to stop," James said, a note of wonder in his voice. "I actually stood up and told them I wouldn't listen to them disparage you anymore." "You did?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "I told them they should be proud of what you've accomplished despite their lack of support. That your exhibition was exceptional, your residency impressive." He paused. "Dad accused me of taking your side. I said there shouldn't be sides in a family." "How did they react?" "Not well. Mom cried about how ungrateful we both are. Dad said I'd regret my attitude when I needed something from them in the future. He sighed. Classic emotional manipulation. I just never saw it clearly before. I'm sorry you had to go through that, I said, genuinely concerned about potential damage to his relationship with our parents. Don't be. It was liberating, actually. The smile was audible in his voice. By the way, I have 3 boxes of your stuff. Mostly old school awards, some photos, a few books. Want me to bring them by the residency this weekend? When he arrived that Saturday, he whistled appreciatively at my studio space. This is incredible, Amber. So much light. We sorted through the boxes together, a strangely bonding experience as we rediscovered shared childhood memories and laughed at forgotten phases and interests. At the bottom of the final box, I found a small photo album I didn't recognize. Inside were baby photos of me that I'd never seen. My mother holding me in the hospital, my father giving me a bath, me taking first steps while both parents watched with genuine smiles. Where did these come from? I asked, throat suddenly tight. James shook his head. No idea. They must have been packed away for years. The images showed a brief window of what appeared to be genuine parental love before something shifted. The contrast with my later childhood made the album both precious and painful, evidence of a connection that had existed once, however briefly, before dissolving into criticism and emotional distance. Do you think they ever loved us? I asked quietly. Really loved us, not just the idea of us or what we represented. James considered the question seriously. I think they did, in their limited way. But love got tangled up with expectations and appearances and their own unresolved issues. He closed the album gently. The problem is, their version of love was too conditional to nourish anyone. As my brother left that evening, he hugged me tightly, an increasingly common gesture between us as we rebuilt our relationship without our parents' toxic influence. We had begun having dinner together weekly, gradually learning how to be siblings rather than competitors in our parents' approval games. 3 days later, I received a text message from my mother, "We've moved to Florida." Left forwarding address with James. No goodbye, no well wishes, no acknowledgement of the seismic shift in our relationship. Just practical information, clinically delivered. I showed the message to my therapist, another positive change I'd made since the residency began. Dr. Samantha Taylor specialized in family trauma and had been helping me understand the patterns established throughout my childhood. How does this make you feel? She asked, setting aside her notepad. Oddly, nothing, I realized. A month ago, this would have devastated me all over again. Now it just feels expected. That's significant progress, she noted. Not numbness, but appropriate emotional scaling. Their message holds less power because you've reclaimed your narrative. My Family Fragments series continued to evolve, gaining depth and nuance as I processed my experiences through art. What had begun as raw emotional response developed into a more complex exploration of family dynamics, intergenerational patterns, and ultimately, resilience. By the midpoint of my residency, I had created 15 new pieces that traced a visual journey from wounding to healing. The residency director arranged for a small exhibition of works in progress, inviting gallery owners and critics to view our developing projects. The response to my series exceeded all expectations. 2 galleries expressed interest in showing the completed work. A photography magazine requested an interview. A university professor asked permission to use images in a psychology course about family systems. As I stood in the exhibition space, surrounded by evidence of my transformation, I realized Helena had been right. My parents' rejection hadn't defined me, it had ultimately freed me to become fully myself. 1 year after that devastating anniversary dinner, I stood in my own apartment, not the tiny Jamaica Plain studio or the temporary residency housing, but a proper 1-bedroom in Cambridge with enough space for both living and working. The walls displayed my photographs alongside art acquired from fellow residents through trades and gifts. Plants thrived on windowsills. Books filled shelves built by James during a weekend visit. My family Fragments series had indeed become my breakthrough work. Following the residency exhibition, Aperture magazine featured an 8-page spread of the images with an in-depth interview. Bernard Phillips had made good on his promise of a solo exhibition at Harrington Gallery, which led to representation by a respected Boston gallery and consistent sales of my work. Financial stability, that elusive goal my parents had insisted could never come from photography, had finally arrived. I maintained my coffee shop job 2 mornings a week, less from necessity than from appreciation for the routine and community it provided. Therapy continued weekly, helping me understand that my parents' inability to love me unconditionally reflected their limitations, not my worthiness. Dr. Taylor guided me through the complex grief of mourning a relationship that had never truly existed except in my hopes and dreams. The hardest part of estrangement, she observed during one session, is accepting that the parents you deserved aren't the parents you received. You're grieving the family you needed but never had. That framework helped me process the ongoing absence of my parents in my life. We had maintained minimal contact, obligatory Christmas cards, occasional updates relayed through James, brief, superficial emails when practical matters required communication. My father had never acknowledged any wrongdoing. My mother occasionally made tentative overtures that stopped short of actual apology, comments like "we miss seeing your photographs" or "we hope you're doing well" that carefully avoided addressing the emotional devastation they had caused. I maintained firm boundaries around these interactions, responding politely but briefly, offering general updates about my career without inviting deeper connection. These boundaries weren't punitive but protective, the emotional equivalent of a scar tissue forming over a deep wound. James had developed a similar approach, though he maintained slightly more regular contact through monthly phone calls. His relationship with our parents had fundamentally changed after he stood up for me, shifting from golden child to disappointment in their eyes. Yet rather than devastating him, this shift had proven liberating. "I don't have to perform anymore," he explained over dinner at my apartment. "It's exhausting to realize I spent 32 years trying to earn approval that was always conditional." Our sibling relationship had blossomed in our parents' absence, evolving into a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared understanding. James had even started dating again, a kindergarten teacher named Rachel who seemed to appreciate his growing emotional intelligence. "She says I'm surprisingly self-aware for a finance guy," he joked, helping me wash dishes after dinner. My friendship circle had expanded beyond Tara to include fellow artists from the residency, creating a chosen family that provided the support and celebration my biological family never had. We gathered regularly for critique sessions, gallery openings, and simple dinner parties where creative energy flowed as freely as conversation. I had begun teaching photography workshops for at-risk teenagers through a community arts program. Watching these young people discover their voices through art, many coming from difficult family situations, felt like breaking a generational cycle. I recognized my younger self in their initial hesitation and blossoming confidence. "You changed my life," 16-year-old Destiny told me after her photograph was selected for a student exhibition. "No one ever told me my perspective mattered before." The irony wasn't lost on me that my parents' rejection had ultimately led to this moment of connection, that without experiencing that pain, I might never have developed the empathy to recognize it in others. One sunny Tuesday morning, I received an unexpected email notification, a message from my mother with the subject line "Your gallery show." My stomach tightened as I opened it. "Your father and I saw the article about your exhibition in the Boston Globe Arts section. The reviewer called your work profoundly moving and unflinchingly honest. We will be in Boston next weekend for a medical consultation. Would it be possible to see the exhibition? We understand if you prefer we don't attend." The request caught me off guard. My latest series, Reconciliation, explored the possibility of healing even in the absence of apology, finding peace not through forgiveness granted to others, but through integration of painful experiences into a coherent personal narrative. After consulting with Dr. Taylor, I replied simply, "The gallery is open Thursday through Sunday, October 6th. The work speaks for itself." I didn't offer to meet them there. I didn't ask about the medical consultation. I maintained the boundary while allowing them access to my art, my truth expressed in visual language. That Sunday afternoon, I received a text from the gallery assistant, "Your parents are here." I had given her a heads up they might come, asking only to be notified, not to be protected or to have them removed. 3 hours later, a brief email arrived from my mother, "Your work is beautiful, Amber. More powerful than we expected. We are proud of what you've accomplished." For the first time, her words contained no criticism, no backhanded compliment, no qualifying statements. Just simple acknowledgement, 30 years overdue. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I sat with the message, examining my feelings with the same careful attention I gave to composing a photograph. There was no overwhelming joy, no desperate relief at finally receiving their approval. Just quiet acknowledgement that they had, perhaps, glimpsed a fraction of my reality through my art. 2 days later, I sent a brief response, "Thank you for coming to see my work. Not thank you for being proud. Not thank you for finally seeing me." Just acknowledgement of the small step they had taken. It was neither reconciliation nor rejection, simply a moment of truth between us. That evening, I hosted a dinner party for my chosen family. Tara and her new boyfriend, James and Rachel, Helena and her partner, and several other friends who had supported me throughout my journey. We crowded around my table, passing dishes family style, conversation and laughter flowing freely. As I looked around at these people who loved me without condition, who celebrated my success without jealousy, who held space for my pain without judgment, I recognized the truth that had taken nearly 30 years to learn: family isn't defined by blood but by belonging. Home isn't a physical structure but a feeling of safety and acceptance. My latest self-portrait series, Becoming, hung on the wall behind us, images exploring identity formation after significant loss. The final photograph showed me looking directly into the camera, eyes clear and unflinching, neither smiling nor somber but simply present. Fully myself at last. What my parents never understood is that by calling me a burden and pushing me away, they actually set me free. The dinner that was meant to break me became the catalyst for rebuilding myself, stronger, braver, and infinitely more whole. Have you ever experienced a painful rejection that ultimately led to unexpected growth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that family wounds don't have to define us, they can transform us into more authentic, compassionate versions of ourselves. Thank you for witnessing my story, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful growth happens after the deepest cuts.